Hello, I'm Sensei Alex Kakuya. Thanks for joining me this evening for Dharma Sunday, where we take canonical Buddhist teachings and tie them to everyday life. The title of today's talk is Astroworld Tragedy, Greed and Antipathy in American Culture. Before we get into that, please subscribe and hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks to this channel. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, that'd be great too. So, several days ago, something truly terrible happened down in Houston, Texas. Travis Scott, Drake, and a few others were performing at the Astroworld Fest. And there was a crowd surge at the event, which resulted in 9 people dying, 300 people being injured. And numbers are still coming in, so it may be more than that now, but those were the last numbers I heard. And there's all kinds of lawsuits going around. People are trying to figure out who's to blame. It's pretty terrible. And I've spent a lot of time in front of my altar chanting and lighting incense for the people who were injured, who were killed. I encourage you to do the same. And I'd like to take some time tonight to investigate what happened and why. I have an article that I'll start off reading first so we can get some details. It comes from BuzzFeedNews.com. It's called Travis Scott Fans Are Divided Over Who to Blame for the Astroworld Tragedy. It was written by Michael Blackman. So let's get into it. Though Travis Scott fans are intimately familiar with the chaotic nature of the artist's live shows, the tragic events of last Friday's Astroworld concert in Houston that left 9 people dead were unfathomable. I know he has a history of encouraging fans to get rowdy and stuff at a show, said Kylie Cameron, a 21-year-old student at the University of Iowa who attended the festival. So I went into it knowing that is the culture there. Cameron told me she had been a fan of Scott since 2017. She first experienced one of Scott's live performances a few years ago in 2018 in Phoenix. That was a fun show and everything because we had seats and we weren't in the pit, she said. When we were looking down, because we were on the upper level, right above the stage, we could see the pit was crazy. Like all the shows I've ever seen, people are constantly getting pulled out of the pit. At the Phoenix show, Cameron said she and her brother had a game plan, having come up with meetup spots in case things went awry. Unfortunately, during this year's Astroworld Festival, which she went to while on a trip to celebrate a friend's 21st birthday, Cameron found herself in the thick of what would later be called a mass casualty incident by the Houston police. For Cameron, the problems at the venue began prior to Scott's set. I was probably about 10-15 people back from the barricade, she said, telling me about the already claustrophobic atmosphere during rapper Don Toliver's performance. And that's when I realized I was in a lot of trouble. I put my phone up to take a video of him, and I couldn't bring my elbows back down to my side anymore. People were compressed very tightly against me. She ended up being pulled from the pit by a security guard and lost a shoe because people kept stepping on her feet. I had a lot of bruises on my legs as a result of it. My knee is very swollen. Though Cameron said she has been experiencing pain, she's been reluctant to go to the hospital. This is America, so we don't really have the best health insurance, she said. The horrific event and its aftermath forever changed Cameron. I went to an ASAP mob concert and was a part of the mosh pit there, Cameron said, and those were totally different. If you fell down, people instantly helped you up, like making sure you were okay. But at Astroworld this time around, Travis would just yell for people to mosh even though it was an all-age event. Like there was a 5-year-old by me. While Cameron was listening to music at the airport, waiting to return home, one of Scott's songs came on. I had to skip it immediately, she said. I can't even listen to him. And the fallout over Astroworld continues, with dozens of lawsuits piling up, many of them implicating Scott, including a lawsuit from the family of a 9-year-old who remains in a coma after attending last weekend's event. Another attendee, a 22-year-old college senior, was pronounced brain dead and died on Thursday. In response, Scott has vowed to assist the families of the victims with funeral costs and promoted teletherapy through a partnership with BetterHelp for those who survived, though Scott listed the incorrect number for those mental health services on his Instagram, and only updated the hotline after BuzzFeed News reached out for comment. Okay, so I think I'll stop there. That gives you the basic gist of the article. If you'd like to read the whole thing, again, it's at BuzzFeedNews.com. The title of the article is Travis Scott fans are divided over who to blame for the Astroworld tragedy. And that's a good question. Who is to blame? And in my own thinking about this event, I've been thinking about that, but I've also, more than that, been thinking about why this bothers me so much. And obviously, it's a terrible thing. It's a tragedy. 9 people dead in a completely preventable event, 300 plus people injured. But there was something else that was kind of gnawing at the back of my head. And I think it goes back to my own history, attending festivals, attending concerts, attending events, way back in the day, and what I experienced during that time. So as I've talked about before, I used to be very deep in the EDM scene. So techno, dubstep, trance, etc. And I partied in the woods, in caves, abandoned airports, etc. Saw people like DJ Kid Icarus, DJ Monk, Cajun K. I don't even know if these people perform anymore, because this was like 20 plus years ago, but you get the idea. So I know that festivals and concerts, by their nature, are inherently dangerous. You have people who are drunk, you have people who are high on various substances, you're surrounded by, in some cases, tens of thousands of people who you don't know, and you don't know what their intentions towards you are. That said, when I think about those days, I can't really think of a time where I felt unsafe, like what was described in the article. I just, maybe it's because I was young and I just didn't know any better, but I honestly always felt like I was okay. And if something happened, people would look out for me. There was a saying back then, PLUR, P-L-U-R, peace, love, unity, respect. And that was what the rave scene was all about, right? So helping out your fellow human being in any way possible. And I experienced this firsthand. Several years back, I went to a Major Lazer show in Indianapolis. Major Lazer is a EDM trio of DJs, and I was partying. I was in the pit. I was moshing. For those of you who don't know what a mosh pit is, it's a group of people. They kind of empty out like an oval or a circle in the middle of the crowd, and you just kind of jump up and down and bash yourself into other people. So you kind of dance violently and blow off a lot of steam that way while the performance is going on. And I'd never been in a pit before, believe it or not. This was my first time. And I went down. I fell. And people are jumping up and down and stomping their feet all around me. And I remember very distinctly in my head, I thought, I'm going to die. Because, it's dark. I'm surrounded by thousands of people. They're jumping up and down. They're bashing into each other. I'm on my back. I hit my head. So I'm seeing stars. I can't really move very well in that instant. It's like, this is it. I'm going to die. But I didn't, obviously. And the reason I was okay was because as soon as I went down, people I did not know grabbed me and picked me up and held me up until I got my senses back, until I was able to stand on my own 2 feet. And they're like screaming in my ear, are you okay? Are you okay? I'm like, it was wild. But that was the atmosphere at those festivals, those events, was that everyone was looking out for each other, PLUR. And what bothers me so much about what happened is that obviously that wasn't the case at this Travis Scott show. Obviously, no one was looking out for anyone else. No one cared about their fellow human being. They were there to see a show, and some of the clips I've seen are pretty sad. There was an ambulance that's trying to get through the crowd to get to people who are injured and evacuate them, and people jump on the ambulance and start dancing. There was another moment where people have fallen down on top of each other, and instead of people turning around to help them up, like what I experienced at that major laser show, instead people just kept dancing and stepped over them in some cases, try to get closer to the stage. And that made me sad. That made me sad. I mean, I was already sad, but that was just the final blow. Because, I mean, what does that say about us as a people, as a culture? And in the article, they're trying to figure out who's to blame. Is Live Nation to blame? They were the people who helped put on the show. Is Travis Scott to blame because he's the artist? And I believe, I could be wrong about this, but I think he also is one of the producers of the event. And I think that's part of it. I'm not going to get into that because I don't know all the details, but I think if we only look at that and decide, is Travis Scott to blame? Is Live Nation to blame? We're really missing the point. Because if we look at the teachings of Vasubandhu and the three natures teachings, we're told that our reality exists at three levels. So we have the conceptual level or the imaginary level, which is what we see every day around us. We have the dependently originated level, which is everything interconnecting with everything else, cause and effect, karma. And then we have below that Buddha nature, the storehouse consciousness, alaya. And in my view, we get so caught up in this top level, blame Travis Scott, blame Live Nation, that we don't look at the causes and effects that led us to this moment. So that's what I want to talk about, is what are the causes and effects that led us to this, led us to 9 people dead, led us to 300 plus people injured at a rap concert. What changed since when I was partying back in the day? And I'm not that old, I don't think. So this isn't a these kids today type discussion. It's just what's changed in these years where if people fall down in the pit, we don't pick them up anymore. And as I've thought about this over the last week, I've determined that this isn't a one-time thing or an event that happened in a void. This is something our society, our culture has been moving towards for many years. It's something in Buddhism that we call matsarya. And what that is, it's a Sanskrit term that means extreme greed or extreme stinginess. It's like if I say I want to accumulate a lot of money, that's greed. If I say I want to accumulate a lot of money and I want to stop you from getting any money, that's matsarya. It's not enough for me to get what I want to stop you from getting what you want. If I say I want a house, I want several houses to live in 3 different states, that's greed. I don't need 3 separate living areas. But if I go on and say I'm also going to pass laws to make it harder for you to get a house, that's matsarya. That's greed beyond greed. This is something that we as a culture have been moving towards for many years. And we've experienced this, right? We've all seen someone like this who can't let anyone else enjoy their own accomplishments, right? So if someone says, I ran 3 miles today, instead of telling them good job, there's always that one guy who says, well, why didn't you run 5? Right? Or, well, I ran 10 miles today. We can't let people have things. It's not enough for us to have things. We have to take things away from other people as well. And the problem is that if we as a society have been moving towards this, then what we experience then is many things popping up like this concert and the tragedy that happened as a result of our collective karma. And a lot of people have this misguided notion about collective karma, this idea that it means we're being punished for the events of the actions of other people. And that's incorrect. No one's punished as a result of karma, whether it's their karma or other people, right? So if the stove is hot and I touch the stove and I get burned, I'm not being punished. right? But there are consequences to our actions. So if I touch a hot stove, I'm burned because that's the consequence of touching a hot stove, right? But I'm not just affected by my own actions, I'm also affected by the actions of other people. So there's a collective karma that takes place. We can think about it as if we're living in a house. I have my own karma, right? Things that happen that only happen because of me, but I'm also affected by the actions, by the karma of other people. So if I'm in a house and I'm sharing it with someone else and they generate lots of trash and they put it in the trash can, well, I'm not being punished because of their trash, but now the trash can is full, right? Now, whether I put the trash there or not, I have to decide how I'm going to respond. Am I going to empty the trash can? Am I going to ask them to empty the trash can? But I can't just say, I didn't put the trash there. It's not my karma. Because I'm affected by that karma. I'm affected by the collective karma of the house I live in. We can also think of this another way. So I have a good friend of mine. She traces her ancestry to Ireland. And the way her family got here is that her grandfather, during the Irish potato famine, it was either her grandfather or her great-grandfather, I forget. But point being, he stole a horse. Not to ride it. They were starving. He stole the horse so they could kill it and eat it because they were going to die. The person who owned the horse found out. They alerted the authorities. Back then, stealing a horse was a death sentence. So they all grabbed whatever they could carry, hightailed it, first boat to America. Now my friend was born in the United States. So that's part of her collective karma. That doesn't mean that she's on the hook, that she should be punished because her either grandfather or great-grandfather, I forget which, stole a horse. But she is affected by that karma, that collective karma. Her family's karma is what led to her being born in the United States. And it's the collective karma of the United States of America that led to this tragedy at Astroworld. Because we in the US have a culture that dehumanizes other people. We see this as objects, we see them as things that are here for our pleasure. And like all objects, whether it's the TV or cars or clothes, if people aren't useful to us, we discard them, just like we discard a broken TV. As an example of this, we can look at the freeganism movement. And freeganism is a movement where people engage in dumpster diving. We have a tremendous amount of food waste in the United States. So a grocery store, for example, may have a bunch of food that they can't sell for whatever reason. Maybe it's still good to eat, but it's a couple days past the expiration date, or the packaging is weird, whatever. So they throw it out. It's in their dumpsters. And the freeganism movement is where people will dumpster dive and get this food and make meals out of it as a sort of, just a sign that, look, this food is good and we shouldn't be throwing it away. In addition to that, homeless people, unsheltered people will dumpster dive, not as a political movement, but simply because they're looking for something to eat. But in our culture in the United States, dumpster diving is against the law. You can go to jail for it. So we live in a society where it's not enough for us to have food to eat. Even if we throw that food away as the grocery store, we're not willing to let other people have it. That's the difference between greed and matsuria. It's not enough for me to have food. You can't have food either. Even though it's food that I'm not going to eat, even though it's food that is literally in a dumpster. For unsheltered people, we write them tickets, we throw them in jail if they go and try to grab that food to eat. We'd rather they just go hungry. That's the society we live in. And it's a direct line from that mindset of homeless people can't have food out of the dumpster to what happened at Astroworld. Matsuria, greed beyond greed, is what causes us to have 50,000 people at the event. It's what we had at Astroworld, but only have 2 water fountains for them to drink from. because we'd rather have them buy our $10 bottled water than have free water to drink. Buy from us or suffer dehydration. And that was the choice they had, because once you leave the festival grounds, you can't go back in. Matsuria, greed beyond greed, is what causes us to dance on top of an ambulance that's trying to evacuate injured people, because we care more about seeing the show than we care about getting these people help. Matsuria is what causes us to dance on top of people, trample them, crush them beneath our feet, because we want to get closer to the performer on stage and not take the time to help them up. And again, we cannot pin this just on the concert goers, because this is the culture we have in the United States. A culture that says we'd rather have a house remain vacant than let someone without a house live there. A culture that says we'd rather throw out food and lock our dumpster than allow homeless, unsheltered people to eat it. So when we look at the causes and effects, when we look at that second level of reality, we see what caused it. It's our culture of Matsuria, our culture of greed beyond greed, that resulted in 9 people dying, 300 plus people being injured. Not even counting the people who will suffer from PTSD and other mental health problems as a result of what happened. And it's our culture that will ensure that more likely than not, this will happen again. Because we don't value human beings anymore. We only value their money. We only value the pleasure that they can give us. And if they can't give us pleasure, if they can't help us get closer to the stage, then we do not see them. We dance on the ambulance that's trying to evacuate them. So that's what needs to be addressed. Our greed beyond greed, our stinginess as a society. So how do we counteract this? Well, one Buddhist practice that I'm very fond of is something called opposing forces. And this is something I do on a daily basis. And essentially what it is let's say you're experiencing anger, you do something that's the opposite of anger. So if you see someone and you don't like them, you give them a compliment. If you're feeling greedy and very stingy, maybe you're experiencing Matsuria in your own life, you make a donation to a charity. And the idea is we're retraining our brain so that we can unhinge ourselves from this unhealthy culture that we live in and move towards thought processes and habits that are life-affirming, thought processes that are healthy, thought processes that end suffering for ourselves and other beings instead of causing them. So if we look at Matsuria, if we look at stinginess, if we look at greed beyond greed, the opposite of that, the opposing force, is generosity beyond generosity. It's compassion beyond compassion. It's activity that's rooted in our understanding of our shared humanity with everyone around us. A humanity that says if someone falls, you pick them up again. This is why the teaching of Buddha nature is so important. The teaching of Buddha nature says very simply that all sentient beings are Buddha, that we all have Buddha nature. This is found in the Uttara Tantra Shastra, but from Asanga, this is also found in the Nirvana Sutra as well. All beings are Buddha. All beings are sacred. All beings are valuable, important, worthy of our care, not because of what they can and can't do for us, but simply because they exist. And Vasubandhu's 30 verses make it clear that the unconditioned dharmas exist within the conditioned dharmas. So if we are looking for Buddha, we don't need to look anywhere else than our fellow human beings. So if we look to change our culture, we simply need to honor and venerate the Buddhas all around us, honor and venerate the people all around us, and the Buddha within ourselves. Buddhas and Buddha lands exist within samsara. And we do this with the understanding of collective karma, that our actions have value, that they make a difference to the collective whole. We see this in Yogacara Buddhism, which talks so much about planting roots of virtue, planting those good karmic seeds in the alaya, in the collective consciousness, so that they'll ripen later on in the future when the situation is correct. This is why our daily practice is so important. We may not realize it, but every time we chant, every time we meditate, every time we study the sutras, we are planting seeds for a better world to be created, a world where tragedies like this don't occur. Every time we spend time talking with our neighbor, every time we prepare food or check in on a loved one, anytime we take out the trash, even though we're not the ones who filled it up, we are planting seeds of virtue. And that collective karma benefits everyone, not just us. And this is important, especially because there are so many other people planting negative seeds in our society. Seeds of anger, seeds of division, seeds of greed, of lust, of vileness. So as Buddhists, we have a very important job to do to counteract all of that negativity through our daily actions and our daily lives. And this is hard work because we're planting all these seeds and we don't necessarily know which ones will grow and which ones won't grow. The fact is, we may not be alive to see what happens. And that's what we have to do. In Pure Land Buddhism, we're taught that a man who has shinjin, which can be translated as unbreakable faith, is equal to Maitreya. Maitreya being the Buddha who is said will rise in a Pure Land to the west. A man who has shinjin is equal to Maitreya. And we need shinjin. We need that unbreakable faith in the goodness of our world, because that's the only thing that will cause us to continue working for it. Continue uncovering the goodness within ourselves and other people, in spite of all the darkness we see. We grab that shovel and we keep digging, and we keep digging, and we keep digging, with the understanding that if we keep digging long enough, hopefully we'll find a treasure. And if not, we'll get so deep down that someone else will come after us and maybe they'll find the treasure. But we can't uncover that treasure. We can't uncover that goodness if we're afraid to dig. So that's what we have to do in the face of not only this tragedy, but the tragedies that are sure to come. Continue with our practice, continue working for the benefit not just of ourselves, but also of other people. With the shinjin, with the unbreakable faith that if we continue putting good into the world, it will make a difference. Amitabha. So that's the talk for today. I hope it was helpful. We'll just end with a few announcements. So this was Dharma Sunday. It happens every Sunday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, broadcast from this channel. I just take some activity, something that's happening in pop culture or the news, and I reflect on it from a Buddhist perspective. On Wednesday, we have another practice, which is a little bit more involved. That's meditation and sutra study. And what that involves is a 15-minute guided meditation, a reading from a Buddhist scripture, followed by a Dharma Talk. And if you got any value from this, again, please subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell. That way you'll be notified when I post talks in the future. If you wouldn't mind hitting the like button, I appreciate that as well. Until next time, Amitabha.